What's going on, everyone? What's up, everyone? Let me see if I can do it. No, it won't let me do it. Um, so, what's up, everyone? This is Be Well Informed, a channel for helping you find more understanding in everyday life, whether that be understanding you know, be through psychology or spirituality, technology, whatever it is. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be making a couple of videos today. Two basic videos. But this video is going to be talking about what the basically is going to be talking about the 4 levels of control, or the 4 levels of willpower. And the reason why I make these episodes, I might actually do a particular episode on that particular fact itself, but there's a couple of reasons why I make episodes like this. One of them is to gain more understanding upon yourself. That's mostly the biggest reason for doing this. But it's also about knowing how to deal with what you've learned, knowing how to knowing how to properly. I'm not sure how to call it, but knowing how to basically deal with this properly, at least at first. Till you get to the 4th level of control. We'll get to that in a second. So, but there are basically 4 levels of control that exists. And in these 4 levels of willpower or control, you're probably going to be somewhere in one of these categories, or between 1 or 2, or possibly even 3 of these categories. So basically, the first level is where you have actually very little control, because you have no willpower, discipline, or you have conflicting desires that keep you from controlling or being able to concentrate properly, or whatever it is. And because this happens, there might be a lot of frustration, or it might suit whatever nature you're in. You might, not be very involved in certain ways. In this first level, there's nothing wrong with these levels. It has nothing to do with good or bad. It has more to do with healthy or unhealthy. Are you in levels in a healthy or unhealthy way? Are you are you healthy or unhealthy within these levels? And only you can decide that based on what you understand about what healthy and unhealthy is. Which I'm gonna make an episode about in the future. But the first level is basically conflict. Either you have very little discipline, or you have conflicting desires, which keeps you from, having strong willpower and concentration. So how do you get out of this stage? Because it's not just about understanding the stage; it's also about how to get out of the stage. And in these particular instances, it's more about understanding the stage and understanding the flaws and the weaknesses of the stage that you're in. And understand that at this level, you can't really do a whole lot. You can't really succeed a whole lot. Another thing to keep in mind is that if you want, some goals that you have in mind, you need to have discipline. You need to get up the discipline to do it, and that requires going to the second stage. And one way of doing this is what I found interestingly easy to do in many ways is to create the meaning that you need to go to the next stage. Um, I've made an episode in the past about this, basically called, I forget what I called it, how to find meaning, or how to find meaning in everyday life, or how to wake up how to, find meaning to wake up in the morning, or something like this. But basically what you do is you think of whatever motives you have to, do whatever you want, and then you think, look at what is keeping you from doing this. What is keeping you from doing this? Maybe it's looking at YouTube videos all day. Maybe it's, watching shows like Keeping Up with the Kardashians or something like this. And then what you do is you try and create the proper discipline to stop doing these things. And then that's how you go to the second stage. So basically, the way to get out of the first stage is to realize that the first stage has flaws, and the flaws are that with this first stage or level, you really can't succeed or achieve a whole lot in life, and that the short-term happiness that you're gaining now isn't necessarily going to be helping you in the long run. So what's the second stage of control or willpower? Basically, it's willpower itself. It's where you're just using pure willpower and force to accomplish whatever goals you're doing. Also keep in mind too that this actually sort of happens naturally. Like, you go through these 4 stages almost naturally, or at least the three stages you go through naturally when you're concentrating or meditating for a long time. So keep that in mind as well. So the second stage is all about willpower and force. So what are the flaws of this stage? Keep in mind that willpower can only do so much. That this tremendous amount of force and willpower that you're putting into this, whatever it is that you're doing, is very tiring. Is draining you of vital energy. And that keep in mind that there might be an easier and better, perhaps a better way of doing this. Keep achieving your goals and whatnot. Because it's not just about using your willpower. It's about, how do I put this in words? It's about, so basically you can think of it this way. When you're creating something, whether that be like a part of a novel or whatever, there could be a really, really difficult way of creating, which some people might try and do, and that's trying to create things word by word by word consciously. By you type it in the word in, and then the, and then forest. You just keep creating these things consciously. Which is what the second stage is all about. Or you could do the second thing, where what you do is you create almost unconsciously. There's a willpower and there's a force going on there, but there's no like conscious force that necessarily goes into it. the words and the creative ideas come kind of naturally. So, how do you enter the stage? Notice that all of your ideas don't come from you, they actually come from either the unconscious or because of something greater, maybe awareness or whatever it is that you believe in. Um, if you're a rationalist-minded person, it'd be the subconscious. If you're a spiritual person, it might be God or spirit or essence or whatever. But it isn't you that's creating these things. And then realize that you don't really have control over what you're creating for the most part. I mean, you have a little bit of control, and you have a little bit of will. You have a little bit of understanding of what you're doing, and you have you have willpower to keep going with what you're doing. But you really don't have a whole lot of control over what you're creating, because you're not really the one creating. So keep these things in mind. So let's go to the third stage. The third stage is where you're still using willpower. You're still controlling things, but not consciously. In this case, it's more like creating, free flowing creation, like I talked about. When you're writing in a novel, when you're creating a novel, when you're writing this novel, you're not doing it through conscious willpower. You're doing it with willpower in you and focus and whatnot, but you're not doing it consciously. The creative ideas are just kind of coming, and then later on your mind will change some things, and you'll change some things and whatnot. But at the time that you were truly creating things, there was no conscious thing saying, "Oh, I will create this idea of a magical fairyland or whatever it is that you're creating." And so you're literally creating things. You're not even creating things, but the things are literally being created out of thin air. They're not being created by thoughts. They're just happening out of pure being itself. I'm gonna make an episode about that later. But so, what are some flaws concerning the third level of consciousness? So notice that even in this level, it's still very draining to you, and it doesn't necessarily help you as much as you would have originally thought. Notice also that even at this level of control, you're still trying to control things, because you might find yourself every once in a while, possibly even most of the time, where you're still trying to control things consciously. And notice that you're doing this. Notice this isn't working. Also notice, try and remember a time where you weren't actually controlling what you're doing, and you weren't actually consciously trying to resist or deny or attach to what is happening to you or yourself or your life or whatever it is. And notice what that felt like versus trying to control everything, trying to put willpower into everything. Was that more peaceful? Is it less peaceful? Whatever, etc., etc. And so that's how you end up in the fourth stage. So what's the fourth stage? The fourth stage is basically non-control, where you're not controlling anything per se, but things are still happening. So I'll give you an example, right? It's actually one of the biggest sort of myths of sorts of detachment. That detachment means detachment from all emotions. That either no emotions are going to be happening, or you're going to be distanced from these emotions. But what actually happens, there is that level that you can reach, but that, in a sense, is actually kind of a control as well. But I'll get into that later, maybe. But there's actually a place, a sort of state that you can reach where even this is too much. And there's a place in the state you can reach where you aren't controlling anything. And you are just letting things happen. Not by consciously just saying, oh, I'm just going to let these things happen. But by just, you're basically so far out of your own way that you're not even really there in the same way that you were, maybe 5 years ago or 2 years ago or a month ago or whatever. And things are just happening. There may be emotions and there may be thoughts and there may be an awareness, but the you that was there before trying to control and push and pull everything is either gone or itself was an illusion in the first place. And this is basically what the fourth level is. The fourth level is basically where you're not controlling things. You're not trying to not control things. You're not resisting things. You're not denying things. You're not trying to attach to things or repel things or push things away or pull things towards you, whatever it is. Things are just happening. You're letting those things happen. Or even beyond that, which possibly could be considered a fifth sort of level of control where there's not even a you that's necessarily controlling or letting these things happen, or pulling these things towards or away from you, or not doing that, but there's a level where you aren't even there in the first place, and the mind is doing things, and the emotions are doing things. But there's no conscious will that's trying to control these things. There's still will. There's still willpower, and there's still mind, and there's still emotions. But there's just no you that's controlling these things. So even in this fourth level, there's still a bit of if there's no control necessarily that's happening. There's still a bit of a you that's there. But in this fifth level, you're actually going beyond the you that's there. And you're actually becoming what is actually, what was there in the beginning before you, entered, you became a teenager and an adult and whatnot. And even before you were a kid, you don't even become, you disappear in a sense. It's not even that you disappear so much as you meld with what is happening with everything. And it's to such an extent that you don't really even exist anymore in the same way that you existed before. So anyways, that's the 5 levels of control. So, so what could be the flaws of the 4th level of control? If you're in this level, which is probably going to be very uncommon, but if you're in this control, what are the flaws of this? And what are some things to help you escape this level? Notice that you are still there, that there are still this tendency to try and distance or control what is happening. Or notice that you, even when you're not controlling or distancing yourself from all these things, that because you exist, suffering exists. You itself are actually the cause of your suffering, are actually the cause of your, not even necessarily your suffering, your sadness, but your, what's the word I'm looking for? In this particular instance, you are the cause of the strain that is, happening within you, the willpower and whatnot. Because even when there's no control that's being that's happening, that you're doing, there's still a you that's there. And so there still might be, times where you're like, oh, I'm going to observe my mind, that's why the detachment from my mind and whatnot. Even though there's no necessarily control process happening there, but because there's a you, there's still a separation between you and between you and what is. And so there is always going to be a willpower that's kind of there. So notice that there is this flaw that even when you have reached this fourth level, you still haven't really reached, a state of continuous oneness and peace and happiness from your external circumstances and your internal circumstances. And notice that, even in this fourth level of non-control, there still may be a willpower and a strain. Because in order for you to exist, in a lot of ways, there has to be a strain that exists. There has to be like a willpower that exists. You think of it this way, right? If there was no willpower, you may still exist, but if you weren't actually controlling things, if you weren't actually doing things, you may not actually exist for very long. So your survival is still being threatened in a sense. Your survival is still there. And I'm going to go into survival more deeply in other videos. But if you want to learn more about this idea of survival, you can see the videos from actualize.org called Understanding Survival, Parts 1 and 2. So, how to get to this fifth level of control. Just let things happen. Just let things be. But try not to, let yourself let things be. And the best way to do that is just to, not try and control anything. Not even try to have a willpower. Because even at this level of non-control that you're in, what I've noticed is that because you are still existent, what happens is that because you're still existent, there's still a willpower that happens. And so eventually you find at this point in time where you actually exit this fourth level into the fifth level where there's no control, there's no you. But unfortunately there really isn't a method to get you to this fifth level. Mostly because if there was, there would be no fifth level, because there would be no way of escaping the you that's there, escaping this willpower that's creating you. So you have to just let things go. Letting this idea of even not controlling go. Because even when you realize the idea of not controlling and not resisting, that still is in a sense is controlling, because you're controlling what you're doing and controlling what your mind is trying to do, in a sense. Even if you have the idea that, which I did at one point, that you shouldn't resist what the mind is doing, and it's even that is control. Even though you're not really controlling what the mind is doing, you're still controlling. Even though it's not necessarily the fourth level of control, but you're still within this symbol of willpower and control. And so you must go to the fourth or fifth level. So anyways, before I go on any longer, I'm going to end this here, and I'm probably going to go to bed because I'm pretty tired. So anyways, this is Be Well Informed, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.